嗨，各位观众，大家好！今天是2月20号，年初二。首先呢，祝大家在羊年当中呢行大运，财源滚滚。那么今天呢，我们专门为大家准备了在每周华尔街呢准备了2期的新春特别节目，就是我们集合了最近我们独家采访的一些美股专家，看他们对今年2015年的全年的走势的一个分析，同时呢也对就是大家的一些交易技巧进行了一个讨论希望大家喜欢。首先呢，我们来看一下美股专家 Charles Bittman 的录像采访。
Charles Bittman 彭博、CNBC 等媒体的熟面孔，以其独特的投资哲学成为华尔街的传奇之一。他是哈佛商学院 MBA 的高材生，25岁进入巴伦周刊工作期间就成功预言过房地产投资泡沫的破裂。而 Charles 积累的经验和财富，让他成功在44岁时创办了 TrimTabs， 一家专门研究美股市场资金流量的投资研究机构。除此之外 ，Charles 成功建立了自己的 ETF， 交易代码为 TTFS， 该 ETF 的表现更是好于罗素3000指数。而在本次 Money Show 的活动当中，我们也对这位投资大师进行了采访，看他会带来怎样的独特言论。Well, Mr. Bittman, thank you so much for joining us. Can you please introduce us the ETF you're managing and what's the investing philosophy behind it?
Okay, TrimTabs Flow Shrink ETF, we started in October of 2011. It invests in the 100 companies that are reducing the number of shares outstanding the most, but only using a portion of free cash flow. And they're not increasing the debt to equity ratio, meaning they're not borrowing money to buy back shares.
So based on the quantitative method that TrimTabs uses, what do you think about the short-term trend of U.S. market?
Well, the short-term trend of the U.S. stock market is the same as it's been since 2011, and that is the number of shares in the stock market as a whole keeps going down. And so if the number of shares keeps going down and there's more money coming into the market to buy shares, so if there's more money chasing fewer shares, stock prices keep going up, which is what we've been saying for several years now.
You think how much can the market rally?
How much? I can't tell. I can tell you the direction. Where it ends up, I've never been very good at the end point.
We know the energy sector has been struggling because of decline of oil price. Is the capital flowing into or out of the energy ETFs?
Well, money has been flowing out of energy commodity ETFs and energy equity stocks. So that is actually encouraging because for many months, up until 2 weeks ago, we saw a lot of money going into energy ETFs, even though the price of oil kept coming down. So the fact that people were chasing a declining price meant to me that the price was still going to get lower. But now that investors have stopped buying and started selling, I turned a little more positive on energy. I think that we maybe have, I don't know if it's a long-term bottom, but I think we have a short-term bottom in the price of energy.
So what do you think about the Asian market? How do you expect the China's economy is going to perform in 2015?
Well, I think China has, to me, a major problem is all the money that's in office buildings that nobody's renting, shopping centers that nobody's buying anything in, and houses that nobody's living in. So the banks have a huge amount of debt securing these properties, and I just don't know how it can end well unless maybe several million more people will decide they want to buy homes or move in, or I don't know, but those empty, it's very scary to me. I just don't see how it ends well. So I would think that until China, and the other, in my opinion, I think that the Chinese government needs to let the people make their own economic decisions, in my opinion, and that, deciding how whatever financial flows, where the money should go, where the money shouldn't go.
Do you think China's economy is going through a bubble?
Well, I think that there's a lot of bad assets that haven't been recognized that I don't know what's going to happen when those bad assets get recognized. I mean, it could be volatile. I just don't know. I'm not, I've been to China only once or twice, and I'm far from being able to say I have any idea what's going to happen.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Charles and Minyi. We know the U.S. weekly wage report, which released last Friday, turns out very impressive. So do you still think the Fed will not increase the interest rate this year?
I don't think the Fed will increase interest rates this year because the job market looks good with those kind of numbers that they reported, but it's really minimum wage jobs. There are a lot of people who went off extended unemployment benefits at the end of 2013. So they're being forced to take any kind of low-paying job. So while we're seeing the number of jobs increase, they're not making more money than they were making when they were on unemployment. So I don't think the Fed can raise because the economy is just not that strong, really.
So based on the method you use, supply and demand, do you think 2015 will continue to be bullish on the stock market?
Well, as long as the number of shares keeps declining as it has been, and as long as there are a lot of new cash takeovers of public companies, which reduces the share count, yes, I think the market will continue to go up.
Well, your ETF, FFTS, I think it doubled since it launched. So do you think the supply and demand picture will continue to be the same this year? Would you like to take this one, Minyi?
Yeah, I think the supply and demand will continue to be favorable to the U.S. stock market. And we've seen a lot of demand from the corporate. If you look at the corporate buybacks, we have a huge increase in the buyback number in the past 12 months. And I see the trend continue.
Well, so can investors short TTFS?
Yes, they can short TTFS. It's an exchange-traded fund. So,
do you recommend it?
I don't have an opinion on that. If they want to short, yeah, I wouldn't short it myself. But if investor want to short it structurally, they can do that because it's an ETF, so it trades like a stock, so you can short along the position without any problem.
Okay, well, thank you. I don't know if you heard about this story. It's about the Vermont janitor, and he made about $8 million just through investing in the stock market. So do you think for individual investors, is it better for them to be stock pickers or just invest in ETF or mutual funds?
Well, I don't know the story, but my bet is that that individual spent a lot of time learning about the companies he was buying. So if you really want to do the hours and really get to know the companies that you're investing in, you can outperform. If you don't want to spend the thousands of hours that it takes to become a professional investor, you should invest in ETFs, and that I would recommend investing in ETFs that are growing free cash flow and use float shrink as a.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, Charles and Minyi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
好的，欢迎大家回来。那么下面我们来看一下我们独家采访 Mark Skousen 的专题节目啊，谢谢。
今天呢，我们也是邀请到了著名的经济学家 Mark Skousen。Skousen 先生曾经担任美国 CIA 的经济学分析师，也曾为 IBM 提供咨询服务。他曾经担任福布斯杂志的专栏作家，同时《华尔街日报》也常常刊登他的文章。在 CNBC 的节目当中，也可以常看到他的身影。Skousen 先生曾经在2012年表示金价会出现卖出的信号，而之后呢，黄金便遭遇了大跌。下面呢，我们就将会关于金价、油价、美联储加息的热点问题采访 Skousen 先生。So, would you like to say hi to our audience?
I certainly would. I would love to say hello to the Chinese. I've been a big fan of the Chinese entrepreneur and the greater Chinese family. And I've been a believer in Confucius. And my favorite Chinese philosopher, Lin Yutang, who wrote the book The Importance of Living. You ever heard of Lin Yutang?
I believe I've heard of him.
Yeah, he's a 20th century Chinese philosopher. His home is in Taiwan because he was anti-communist. But so Mao didn't like him, but he was a very good philosopher. Yeah. Lin Yutang.
Mr. Skousen, thank you so much for joining us. From an economist's point of view, can you give our audience some suggestions of investing?
Well, the key is, I'll give you a quote from the Maxims of Wall Street, which is the new book that I've written, which I think Chinese are famous for sayings, like Confucius sayings and so forth. And there's an interesting saying that says, the more you save, the better you are as an investor. And the reason is you have more money to invest, and so you're more focused on how to make money. And so I think if you save a lot, and the best advice I can give to learn how to be a better investor is to just start investing, because then you will focus on what works and what doesn't work. Yeah.
Do you think investors should focus more on sectors or industries rather than specific companies?
Well, I think it's both. I think you have to know a little bit about individual companies, and then you need to know about industry sectors, like the oil market. The regular stock market's been rising, but the oil market has plunged. And so that's an important factor, because in my newsletter, Forecasting Strategies, we had several oil stocks where we sold out and took our profits. If we had stayed in it, we would have lost 50% in those stocks, and that's way too much to lose. So I think it's important to look at the sectors as well as individual stocks. A lot of the companies are good companies. It's just that they went down too far.
I'm very glad you brought up oil. So do you think the oil price has hit a bottom?
I think so. It's really hard to predict the bottom in a market. Some have predicted as low as $30 a barrel. I don't think it'll go that low. I think it's close to a bottom, because you still have low interest rates. You still have the Federal Reserve expanding the money supply and so forth. You still have demand for energy all around the world. The economy is recovering. So I think we've probably seen the bottom in oil, but nobody knows for sure.
How do you think the low oil price will affect the U.S. economy in the long run?
Oh yeah, in a very positive way. On net balance, even though the energy companies themselves are laying off workers and cutting back, for the rest of the economy, the majority of the economy, the lower prices are a really good thing.
I remember you have successfully predicted the decline of gold price. You said there was a buy signal in gold last year. Now that the gold price has slightly increased, what's your opinion about the gold price? Do you think now is the right time to invest in gold now?
I'm still skeptical about the gold price, because I think it may have bottomed out here on a short-term basis, but it's really hard to predict. Now, we've made money in my trading services on gold stocks, and they are relatively cheap. There's no question about that. And I am recommending that people buy gold. I keep on me at all times a gold coin. I know the Chinese love gold, and so this is a Mexican 50 peso gold coin. This is 1.2 ounces of gold. And I keep it with me at all times as a bargain, as a reminder of what sound money is like. And I also have silver, the silver dollar, American Eagle silver dollar. And so I think these are wonderful investments over the long term, even though they don't pay any interest. So, but on a short-term basis, I'm still not willing to give a buy signal on gold yet. I'm still skeptical.
Almost the whole world is cutting rates, while the Federal Bank is expected to increase the interest rate in middle of this year. So what's your opinion towards the quantitative easing, and how will the different monetary policy affect the equity market?
Well, I think quantitative easing was unnecessary. I think if they just increased the money supply at a steady rate, which is what Milton Friedman advocated, the monetarist rule, that's all that was necessary. I don't think we needed to prop up the mortgage market more than it was. So I'm not a big fan of the Federal Reserve's easy money and low zero interest rate policies. On the other hand, I don't think they're going to raise rates in June. They might, but we need to see more inflation on the consumer price index, because that's what bond traders look at. And the CPI, with energy prices declining, the CPI actually declined last month. by 0.6%. So higher rates require more inflation, more price inflation, and I haven't seen it so far. So for that reason, I think the Fed will be reluctant to raise rates. And like you said, they're cutting rates in Europe, they're cutting rates in Japan. So I think it's going to be a good year for the stock market as long as they don't raise rates. That's the key.
Okay, last question. How do you expect China's economy is going to perform in 2015?
Well, I think that the Chinese economy is starting to decline in the growth rate. That's pretty evident, the trend line. And no country can sustain 8 to 9 to 10% growth rates. So I'm seeing a lower growth rate in China. And it'll be interesting to see how, at some point, I think China has to go through a crisis because they've pumped a lot of money into the system, building cities and apartments and so forth that I understand are empty. But if that's the case, that's what Austrians call malinvestment. And so I think it's a dangerous sign. I've always thought that this new business class of wealthy Chinese are going to really rule the country. All right?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Okay.
您正在收看的是凤凰卫视。